So hi, everybody. Welcome back from your
Welcome
very
back.
short lunch break. Yeah. Should I jump right in, Hollis, or you want to?
Jump right in.
Okay. Let everybody keep eating and I will entertain you here. So yeah, I'll, introduce myself again. I'm the California Coastal National Monument Manager. Um, I reside in Humboldt County, but I grew up in Santa Cruz. So I grew up on the coast, actually in the water. My family owned a sail. We're liveaboards in the Santa Cruz Yacht Harbor, and we lived on a Catalina 30 and then a Fantasia 35, and we would cruise from Santa Cruz down to Cabo San Lucas and Puerto Vallarta, and we would also sail up to Bodega Bay and stay in that harbor. We would sail up and down the California coastline. So I grew up immersed in the California coast, and then went to school up at Humboldt State University, then called Humboldt State, now called Poly, and just never really left the coast in my heart. And I am thrilled. As soon as I found out that this job existed, I met Rick Hanks back in 2010, and I learned that this job existed, and it was the job that I wanted to. So 13 years later, I get to be this person, and I am extremely grateful. And, I have talked to Rick many times. He's still so engaged and wants to help me in any way possible. I'm also in contact with Dave Ledig. So I have these people wanting me to succeed and support, which it really does take. This is a really interesting monument to manage. So that's just a little bit about me and my background. So I'll just jump right into my background is in interpretation. I was 12 years an interpretive specialist for the BLM in Arcata. So that is where I am resting now a little bit in this presentation, because I am new to this position. I've been in the position, it's about 6 weeks now. So this is a presentation I really literally threw together to, hopefully answer some questions and get you excited about the monument and interpreting the monument. I'm sure this kind of presentation will change over time. So let's see. Let me do it. There we go. Okay, so this is just what we're going to talk about today. This is a presentation developed especially for you all. And I just want to say, listening to the other presentations and all that you do, first and foremost, thank you for all that you're doing on the California coast, a coast that's near and dear to my heart. The presentation so far and just the conversation is inspiring and exciting. So thank you. So today we'll just cover what is the California Coastal National Monument, how did it become a monument, we'll do a quick dive into the history, talk about the online portions, and how important you are and all of our partners. And I'll just take a look at the Sonoma Coast real quick from some of the maps I have, and then we'll talk about interpretation and topics, themes, and storylines. I will give Hollis these storylines and themes that were developed in an interpretive plan for the monument. I will share with Hollis to share with all of you just as nuggets and ideas moving forward that might be helpful. So what is the California Coastal National Monument? Hollis is a great, mentions, like, people don't even know it's a monument. And so that is my job. All of our jobs is getting this word out that there is this California Coastal National Monument. We have this 110 miles of actual coastline with more than 20,000 rocks, islands, and pinnacles. It's all the rocks and islands that are exposed above mean high tide. So that number is changing depending on, how erosion takes place in the landscape, these numbers and the rocks, and it goes from Mexico all the way to Oregon and out 12 nautical miles from this coastline. It was preserved as part of the National Conservation Landscape System, and which is sort of the gems of the Bureau of Land Management. I think there's over 900 of these units, include everything from, desert, like Bears Ears is part of the the National Landscape Conservation System, Berryessa Snow Mountain, Headwaters, the King Range, all of them are part of a national conservation system that is administered by the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of Interior. So just real quick, I know this is a lot of words, but I guess the reason I wanted to bring up this history, this is sort of the chronological history. Rick Hanks, the original manager, really saw this as important. And I agree with him that that early on, presidents saw the value in this coastline. President Hoover, in 1930, almost 100 years ago, temporarily withdrew it, from being sold or developed in any way. And along the way, there was some hot potato, like who manages it, who takes care of it, the Department of Fish and Game, or, now the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the state and the feds went back and forth, and then it was into the California Islands Wildlife Sanctuary. And then we signed a memorandum of understanding with Department of Fish and Game, and we co-managed it. And then it was, BLM basically took the reins and designated as an area of critical environmental concern, which is a designation not as strong as wilderness or as a conservation lands, but it's a way for managers to say this is an important resource, and we don't need Congress or for the president to tell us that. So the area of critical environmental concern was something that came from the field. All of the biologists, field biologists said this is something that we need to be concerned about. And then Congressman Farr introduced this, it has to be for the president to use his authority under the Antiquities Act. It's a much stronger case if there has been a law passed, or it's in Congress somewhere. So House Representative Farr, Congressman Farr put it into HR 3911 in 1998, and then President Clinton established it in 2000. And that was just the rocks and islands. He used the Antiquities Act to establish the California Coastal National Monument. And then we came ashore in 2014. President Obama and also, Huffman, Congressman Huffman was a big player in this particular designation in 2014, added the Point Arena Stornetta piece of ground just outside of Point Arena that, is the mouth of the estuary of Garcia River, and a really magical piece of ground north of you, I'm sure you're all aware of. And then in 2017, there were additional 5 on-land portions added. And here's roughly the map. There's 3 in Humboldt County, 1 in Mendocino, 1 in Santa Cruz County, and then the Piedras Blancas Outstanding Natural Area, which already had a designation of protection, was also added to the monument. So not only the rocks and islands, it's a piece of thing that we don't manage. And then there's these on-land portions that are managed by 5 different field offices, and 3 different districts. Administratively, it's a complicated resource to manage and requires a lot of attention and resources from all those different field offices. So the way we do that is through partnership. Partnerships, your partnership is critical to preserving and protecting this resource. And so we have, Rick Hanks, came up with this idea, and through resource management planning, these 3 different kinds of partners. And so, Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods is a collaborative partner, signed on in, 2011. I think it was Michelle was the executive director that signed the MOU. And, Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods has been doing this good and hard work of getting the monument out. These are photos from a while ago. As you could tell, you might recognize people, but, the seabird monitoring, human disturbance monitoring, education, outreach. These are pieces and parts of partnerships that happen along the coast. But the Stewards of Coast and Redwoods has been a really important partner throughout, since it became a monument. And then just, the area that we're, that you all are interpreting and, monitoring is part of this resource management plan. And these maps are not great, I realize, but I wanted to highlight, these are part of the management plan. And if you look, the lighter color purple is the ocean. And then the darker purple on the right there, the map on the right, is that 12 nautical mile corridor that I mentioned before. And then all those red dots dots along that coastline are the California Coastal National Monument, all the rocks and islands. And so you can see that through, this chunk of the coastline, so as it goes down, this is, of course, it goes down to Bodega Bay. This is all the subunits of the monument that are managed, and then that the coast, stewards of Coast and Redwoods, help us with. So anyway, I thought this was an interesting piece, just seeing how thick with red, that not all of the California coastline is like that with all those rocks and islands. So you guys are, managing a really important part of this monument. You help us manage. We manage together. And so I'm just going to, talk a little bit about interpreting the California Coastal National Monument. Just going to jump in with some of the highlights. I could talk about the monument and everything I just went through, the history and origins and all of those different online portions in more detail. And I do have all of my contact information, so please feel free to reach out anytime. I'm available to you. You guys are doing the hard work, and so I want to support you in any way possible. So I'm going to jump into what I know, because this is something that I know and I've done for a long time, and I'm hoping it will help you, because interpretation is a key piece of what we do. And so the vision, so I'll back up just a little bit. For every piece of ground that the Bureau of Land Management manages, we have to have something called a resource management plan. And it was designated by FLPMA, which is the Federal Land Management Policy Act, that we have a planning document that includes the public. It's part of the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act process. So the California Coastal National Monument has its own the resource management plan. And in that management plan, there is a vision. And so this is the vision, this spectacular interplay of land and sea, which we all know, and healthy and safe haven for flora and fauna, and an inspiration to visitors, so that there's appreciation and a desire to protect these coastal ecosystems. So that was the vision that the folks started with. And then in through that vision, we kind of synthesize it down to interpretation, education, outreach. So through interpretation, we hope that people learn to understand what this resource is, and through this understanding, there's an appreciation. And through appreciation, there's a desire to protect and to care for, to be good stewards. And so that is the whole point of interpretation. Interpretation is different than education. Interpretation is meant to inspire. Education is, to teach. And they often get lumped, but they are different in their own right. And so what I sort of foresaw that you all do, because you're out there, you're looking through a scope with your binoculars, you're monitoring data, and it's kind of like a roving interpretation. It's people are interested in what you do. I mean, how many times have you been asked when you're looking through your scope, oh, what are there whales out there today? And people come up to you, or you tell them you're looking at birds, and they're like, oh, I saw a bald eagle yesterday when I was on my hike. There's always these people are interested, and they're interested in what they're seeing, and they want to share what they're seeing, and they're interested in what you're seeing. And so this roving interpretation is great, because that people have an interest already. They'll come up to you, or you could go up to them as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about roving interpretation as more so than a planned interpretive talk, but I could talk about that as well. So essential ingredients, I'm going to give you some of these essential ingredients, sort of the messaging. Also, reading your audience is an important piece. And then we'll talk a little bit about the environment, and I'll give you just a couple field tips that I use. Characteristics of an effective message. It's relevant, it's fun. And, we'll go over some of the messages, but obviously, seabirds and pinnipeds and, geology, those are key topics that we can, synthesize down into messaging and some interesting storylines and interpretive themes that I think you'll be able to bring to those folks that come and ask you about what you're up to. And so, knowing your audience, who is your audience? Is it a family, and they're, do they want to be engaged? Is it some kind of, public land user that, is on the resource for a different reason than you, and is there an opportunity for engagement? And there's different kinds of visitors, and so it's important to remember you may have a different worldview. They may have a different knowledge or experience level, different information needs. I loved it when we were talking earlier about I forget who said this, but somebody would say, like, I always like to have a brochure, something I can say, like, here's some more, if there's interest, like, oh, here's a map of the local area. Here's, something that might interest them. And so this is, something, you have these kind of things in your backpack with you, or you have some kind of, you can answer their questions through a visitor guide or whatever it is that you can offer to to those folks. And then just reading your audience, if they're busy, if obviously you're not going to go up to them, and just kind of reading your audience. If you are walking along the trail, and you are truly roving, it's important to pay attention to those social cues, and respect people's privacy. And then just a couple of field tips, just smiling. Some people, they go on a hike and they're by themselves, they're walking along the coastline, and maybe they haven't seen another human, especially in the post-pandemic, like, people are being really careful and they haven't seen another human. Smile at them, and so just smiling, being inviting, friendly, being approachable, and offering up, oh, look at this spotting scope, be visible, and that curiosity that they have, capitalize on that. And then, like I said, always have a map, and then we have all the questions, right? Like, if you've been out there on the coastline, sometimes we'll kind of have the joke line of the bald, the normal questions of whales, and being able to speak to that. Like, of course, if you're looking for birds on the horizon and looking at seabirds through a scope, you'll probably see a spout and say, oh yeah, I saw one yesterday, or giving that information, anticipating those questions and sort of having those in your back pocket. And then really the interpretive piece is telling a story. Like, if they ask a question and they look at the common murre colony, like, common murres have this fabulous story to talk, that the egg that spins in a circle and doesn't fall off the rock, it's like adapted to where they are nesting right there on the rock. That story that Paul told today about how they just go on the islands and collect the eggs, like how that would just never, it's sometimes wild to think about those stories and the way that we used to look at the natural world in a different time. And so yeah, having some of those stories in your back pocket, people remember a story. And then, of course, the field guides, things that you can give them for free, or that you can pull out and have them look at and give back to you. They can find their own answers. That's always a good thing. And then, just the visitor's bill of rights, like, their privacy, and, let them have their piece. And if you disagree, it's probably not a great place. Like, you can, agree to disagree, and just, they have the right to have their thoughts, and also just receive accurate information. And it's really important, if you don't know the answer to a question, to say so. You don't have to be the know-it-all. Just say, gosh, that's a great question, I don't know, let's see if we can find out, if you have a book or a guide, or something, and maybe steer them to getting more information. And that's great. Like, we want to inspire them to to want to know more. And then, as you step away, thank them for their interest, and you're excited. You're like, oh, this is the trail, you want to check it out. So you want to direct them to where they might find out more. And so, yeah, so be brief and stimulate their sense of wonder. That's really the gist of it. So I'm just going to jump in quick to some of these themes, and this is going to be the handout that Hollis is going to share with you. This is the overall California Coastal National Monument theme, is this dynamic interplay of land and sea. We saw this before in the vision, so this is the vision taken to a different level, just for interpretation. And so one of the first, themes of seabirds, seabirds are adapted. Talking about seabird adaptations is fascinating. in this, challenging environment. They make their life on the ocean. And so, they have special glands that allow them to, drink salt water. And they have all these special adaptations that is fun to share. And so, some of them, you could focus on the brown pelicans and how they were removed from the Endangered Species Act, or, black oyster catchers. It's just like, the eye. And one of the things that, you could always tell that someone, they're like, oh, I saw this bird. It looked like it had a Cheeto in its beak. And, that's how they're talking about the black oyster catcher, because it looks like they have a, and so, talking about some of these would be storylines that you could flesh out a little bit on your own of what interests you. And then, of course, cormorants are these, great at fishing, and, peregrines are often found on the coast these days, and they really add they've increased in population and become a big part of the California coast. And then I always like to highlight Western gulls because they are so well adapted. And boy, if you can get someone to fall in love with a gull, you've done your work, because there's, they've always kind of been seen as a pest, but I love gulls. And, if you can show them a gull with a chick, those chicks are just the cutest thing. So just any following some of these storylines and fleshing them out of things that you're interested in is a great idea. And then, pigeon guillemots also have a really unique call, and they are always, nesting. So you could talk about that. And then also always I bring up any opportunity I have to say, you see that bird moving, they are reacting to our presence. Hopefully this is not the case, but if they're reacting, then you're too close. And so just reminding people that we want to give them space at any chance you get. And then the other, another theme is seals and sea lions, or pinniped marine mammals, dependent on the monument. And it's kind of their last stand, the place that they need to haul out and, thermoregulate. And we're on the beaches, we're taking up that coastline that they may have if we weren't there. And so this is their place, and how they can tell the difference between, sea lions, with, true seals and sea lions. And, also this opportunity to highlight human disturbance. If you're too close, this is the behavior that you'll see. And that's how you know you're too close and you want to back off. And then, of course, tide pools, another theme, depending on where you're standing or sitting, they are complex ecosystems. Life forms in tide pools are resilient to changes. They are just incredible how they can live without, in open air and underwater. We can't do that. And so without a whole lot of things. So just pointing out those differences. And then always, the human disturbance piece. We always want to point that out if we can, so people know how to respect the resource. And then geology. I remember, sorry, I should have written down these names as you were talking, but one of you was a geologist. And I was like, oh, awesome. Talking about the geology of these rocks is another theme. There's a lot of words I know, but, the tectonic and volcanic, this is a geologically active place. And the winds and the waves, they create that ever-changing landscape. So, finding out more, talking to the geologists as part of your group, and maybe coming up with some of these storylines that are directly applicable to, the Sonoma coastline and where you guys are on the coast would be a great potential, topic to discuss. And then, of course, human relationships. People love the coastline, and this, is. You guys get to live in this amazing place. And so, for time immemorial, Native Americans, used all the tribes along the coast, used and enjoyed and experienced the coastline. Humans continue to utilize the coast for different reasons. There's always, you could talk about this shipwrecks and outdoor recreation, and then just really the if you're talking about the monument and that, that's something you feel comfortable talking about, just talking about what a challenge it is to manage this monument and just how we really need everybody to work together. It's really critical for all of us to work together to accomplish that task. And so the most important piece is have fun. I would always, as a picture of me with a bunch of kids, like I just love sharing the monument and what I know. And I always am learning something new out there in the field, and the questions the kids ask are so fun, and adults, everybody. So that's the most important piece. And that's when you're smiling and having a great time. And yeah, so that's what I have today, Hollis. I want to thank you all for being here on this Saturday and spending your time learning about the coast and, planning. You're making the coast a part of your daily, weekly life. You live it, you breathe it. So thank you for all that you do. And yeah, I'm open for questions or comments or things I could help with. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm really excited that you have a monument interpretive plan. And please share, because I coordinate our tide pool education program, and we have many more classrooms requesting field trips to the tide pools than we have low tide days. And so we're in the, and we double up. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 in a day on either one beach or spread across a couple of beaches. And of course, the challenge is having enough docents on those days. But
Right.
What we're in the process of doing right now is developing a modular marine education program where we have our tide pool touch table if we're down near Bodega Head.
I heard that. That's so cool that you have that.
Oh no,
awesome.
It's very cool because we can take it to events and you don't need a low tide day to do it. But also the Bodega Head offers so many wonderful opportunities because they're the seabirds. There's the unique geology of the Bodega Head. It's part of the selenium block that's moving north. The Cordham Trail has its own geology because of the subduction zone, and there's a whole lot going on there. And so we're trying to put together like a modular program that we can offer to school groups and classrooms. And we have a Redwood interpretive master plan, thanks to the Save the Redwoods League. But if you have a monument interpretive plan, it would be very, very helpful to us. So I'm really, really thrilled to hear that.
So when you say modular, when you say you're developing a does that mean like curriculum? You're developing curriculum?
Well, we'd like to address the geology. It depends on the season because the seabirds aren't nesting all year round, or
Right.
if we're visiting the harbor seal colony, they're not pupping all year round.
Right.
So there are different components that we would like to mix and match depending on the interest of the class, the age, the docents that we have available, and the wildlife that's present at the time.
That makes sense. Yeah. So maybe in the fall when everybody's pupped and seabirds are gone, and that's when you talk about geology, of the, and then
Right,
maybe do the tide pools then. And so, tide pools are best in the spring, I guess. But yeah, I have some thoughts on that. The interpretive plan needs an update, but I shall, because so I'll happy to share all of it with you.
Wonderful.
But, the two, yeah. So I have some thoughts also because we have this program called Teachers on Public Land. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't have any information about it.
Yeah, so we would have to do it for next year, but I've worked with a teacher on public land and they develop curriculum specific to that resource. So basically the BLM pays for them. They get, the teacher gets the credits that they need to get their raises. What's it called? It's like continuing education credits from University of Colorado.
Okay.
They get 3 of those credits and they work with a field office. So for you, it would be, probably the Central Coast or Ukiah field office with that staff, and that staff would take them to the coastal areas. And then they'd probably work with you and develop the curriculum that then they would then use in their classroom, is the idea of Teachers on Public Land. So it's getting these teachers to be able to speak the monument and coastal resources, allowing them, but they develop their own curriculum that they would then take into their classroom and share with other teachers. So that curriculum could be this sort of seasonal. It seems like the modular sort of like seasonal curriculum that would fit for each season with one of these topics. It's an idea.
And I know a 7th grade life science teacher that would be very interested in this.
Oh, good. That would be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd
Yeah.
like
If
to
you
share
know a
this with
teacher
you.
that's
Thank you.
interested. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Yes. And I see a
Okay,
raised
great.
hand. Yes. Okay.
Oh,
Hi.
yes.
Suki.
Hi, yes.
Hi.
So I started working with Williside Middle School, oh my goodness, how many years ago? Maybe that was about 2004, 2005. And I created a living classroom project, but then somebody else created the same thing in their larger organization. So now I call it the not living classrooms, but living classroom project. That's what I now call it. But she's over at Williside Middle School, and we've been doing their 7th graders for years. We did have a 2-year gap with COVID. And I had taken prior to that Project Wild, Project Learning Tree, and Project Save Our Seas for, educational enhancement certifications for education in the outdoors. And we do a similar thing. So I'm very interested in your programs because we do work. I get schools that come from the Bay Area. They do campouts and do multiple things. And
Awesome.
the estuary is our living classroom. So I'm highly interested in any kind of partnerships or things we can do to make sure that we're giving the most up-to-date information. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Debbie Grimalow was the teacher that I had in mind, Suki.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm writing down some notes real quick because of what I'm going to send to Hollis after this.
She gets her students. Her goal is that her students are going to grow up to save the earth, save the planet. And so she gets them outdoors as much as possible.
That's great. We got to get them before 4th grade? We let them fall in love, and then we start to teach them about all the other things. Yeah. And then so awesome. That's great.
And I love what you were saying about interpretation, because that has been, my objective on getting kids to visit the tide pools all these years, because if they're not aware of it, if they don't know that that these animals exist, nobody's going to care for it, and therefore nobody's going to work to protect it after we're gone. So
right,
it's really important.
Yeah, and you want those kids to take their families on these, well, let's go to the tide pools, Mom, and get their families out there, and they're teaching their adults about it, which is just kind of a neat shift for them because they know more than their adults sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just such a special resource that we have right off of our coast.
Yeah, you guys are really, really lucky. Yeah.
Suki, your hand is still up.
Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts or comments? Anything?
I do. I don't know. I can't seem to use this hand button.
Oh, there's a geologist. There she is. Yes.
I am the geologist, and I was just wondering. So Point Reyes National Park used to have this great poster online, and I had it bookmarked about the Franciscan Formation. It was a poster, it was poster size, and I've been trying to find it. I don't know if you could track it down. I tried every way possible to get it, but it's through the National Park System, and they just took it off their website. And it's a really nice, it's got pictures of all the different rocks in the Franciscan, which is really complicated. And from Point Reyes, but those are the same rocks as we have in the Sonoma Coast. So if you come across that, will you send it to me?
Yes. So Point Reyes, I do have a contact on there. So a poster of the Franciscan Formation. Is that that was what it was called?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, it's a poster size thing. It's old, really old. I mean, maybe I saw it like in 2015 or something like that. But
okay.
I had a link to it. Then they took it off their website. And then I did look on the national parks, they restructured their whole education thing. And
right.
So
right. Yeah, we did kind of, yeah.
I mean,
okay,
yeah, it's very hard to do geology to the layman on this coast because it's so complex. I can do a lot of arm waving, but
Yeah, it's about finding those, and I guess that's that's ultimately what my job was as an interpreter, right? Is taking those complex issues and, the biologists weren't always satisfied with how I simplified things, but when you're talking to somebody who really has never even thought about how those formations got there, that starting at that basic level, not dumbing it down, but just really trying to get to that basic place, especially with geology that is really complex. That is something that, maybe we can work on together, because I don't know that piece of geology. I know more of the North Coast. So that, which the Franciscan Formation does make its way north, but anyway, more to talk about there for sure, Beth.
Yeah. I just did a geology thing with some people from Japan, and the professor didn't know that the earth was liquid underneath, underneath the plates. And I'm like, okay. So, it's hard to know where you have a starting point sometimes.
Yep.
So.
Exactly. Yeah. And if there is more question, if you can be there to answer those questions, the better, more the better.
Right.
Okay, Karen has a raised hand. Were you done, Beth? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is so funny because I literally just sent Hollis yesterday an agenda for a roving training that we're doing on the 18th.
Oh, awesome.
And basically, what we're doing is taking sort of our basic training and now saying, okay, how this particularly is focused on the tide pools, but it's like, okay, how to work with groups in the tide pools, but what if you're a roving interpreter? What do you do? And it's sort of taking the same principles that you're talking about and making them super concrete, like here's how to plan when to go, here's what to put in your pack, here's how to approach visitors, here's how to say goodbye to visitors, here's like interpretive themes you can focus on, all the stuff you're talking about. And I think there's actually a couple of people on this call who are attending that. But I also just wanted to mention it because if there are folks on this call or on this Zoom who are interested in roving, but maybe not necessarily in the tide pools, you may want to come for the first 15 minutes. You're welcome to come for the first 15 minutes of our call of our presentation, where we're talking about those basics that you might then go ahead and apply to other aspects of roving on the coast with the different components that you were just talking about. So I just wanted to extend that out there.
I'm so glad it dovetailed. I feel like it's, interpretation is relevant always, but I'm glad I didn't know my audience as well as I should have when I was developing my talk. So I'm glad I got something right. So thanks.
Oh, it's great.
Well, you did. We were just jumping all over you here.
Oh, good.
And Karen, that's on the 18th. Is that right?
Correct.
March 18th.
March 18th. And if anyone here if you don't want to register, but you just want to come for those first few minutes, we're going to be starting at 1:15 in the Shell Beach parking lot. And we'll be doing 15-20 minutes on sort of all those basics of roving interpretation. And then we'll be going down into the tide pool. So if you have the tide pool training as well, you can come down in the tide pools and we'll actually be practicing our interpretation. But if you're just a coastal rover and you just want to kind of reinforce your skills in terms of interpretation on the coast and what to put in your pack and that kind of stuff, you're welcome to join us for that first part of it. Just know that it's a Saturday, and if it is nice weather, part of why we're at Shell is because there is lots of parking, but you might want to come a little early because you might have to park in the, in the overflow lot and walk over to the bluff where we'll be doing our talk. But I'll have my little state parksy kind of hat and stuff on, so it should be easy to find me.
Anybody else
So
have
is there
a
any
question? Yeah, go ahead.